Hello and welcome to this week's Genius Material webinar. We're going to have a look at how you can make your revision notes even more memorable, so it's even easier to recall them, not just at home in your practice sessions, but in particular under pressure in the exam. And we'll mention how important it is to pay attention to all three keys to learning, because they all fit together like a very small jigsaw puzzle. Without all three parts, you're setting yourself up for failure. We don't want that. We'll start with a quick reminder of the process of getting from your course manual to the online revision calendar. In other words, from a section of your course notes through making notes your brain will like, at the same time spending enough time with the material for your brain to make a pattern from it and send it to your long-term memory, through devising a test question for yourself, and through to putting it in the online revision calendar so you can forget about when you have to revisit it, because the calendar will tell you what to test yourself on and when. Let's start at the beginning. You know by now that there are three things you need to pay attention to if you want to remember your revision. And this crib sheet is available for you to download in the resources section of the website. It's not a bad idea to print one off and leave it somewhere visible so you can check every so often that you're doing everything you can to help yourself. 1. Look, you need to spend enough time with the information in the first place for your brain to make a pattern of it and then to send it to your long-term memory. 2. The notes you make need to be in a form that suits your style of learning. A lot of what we talk about suits all human beings. After all, we have a lot in common. But then there are also variations, so make sure you know what your strengths are. And you'll know that because of your eBook. And that will have been downloaded by you after you did your questionnaire at the beginning of the process when you first joined Genius Material. The pages towards the back of your eBook have got a letter in the top corner. There's more about this in the training video number 5. But no matter how well developed your visual skills are already, you do well to develop them further, because the more you do, the faster your revision will be. So let's have a look at some notes that somebody sent and see what we can do to make them even more brain-friendly, even easier to remember. As I've said before, there are no prizes for making beautiful notes, but all that's important is that you remember what you've worked hard on in your revision. I'm very, very grateful to one person in the pilot group who sent me his notes to use as an example this week. Thank you very much indeed, because I'm hoping that this will be helpful to you, but also to everybody else. Now, what we've got here is something at the top. It says operating activities, and a little way down then it says investing activities. The first thing that I would say is this really should be 2 different pages. Do you remember to make sure that you write very little information on each page? We have an infinite capacity to remember any number of pages, but the more information we bung on one page, the better the chance of us forgetting it. So you don't want to set yourself up to forget, you want to set yourself up to remember. So the first thing I would say about this, and this person has not written too much on that page, let's face it, but really, to do yourselves even more favours, write even fewer notes on each page. There's no reason why they couldn't have put that top part on one page and this on another page. Remembering, of course, if you've read your ebook and watched the training videos, you'll know that to write then a question on the reverse of the page, a question that you devise, that by answering it you can check that you know the information on this side. So he's put the title here in capital letters to differentiate it from the notes underneath, and he's done exactly the same thing here, do you see? So it's consistent, so that's good. He's separated the title from the words. So far we've got 2 pages, and those of you who haven't seen me use this before, apologies for my handwriting. I'm doing the best I can. I hope you can read it sufficiently. I hope it does the job. So, and he's also used uppercase here.
Oops. There are lots of different ways of writing your notes. There's no one right way, but the one good thing here is you separate the title from the rest. I would suggest putting it on 2 pages. I would also suggest, and I'm going to keep going on about this session, I would also suggest the use of colour. Do you see how this page is, well, it's monochrome, isn't it? You can help yourself by using colour. Also, I would make sure that these 4 points stand out to the eye by bulleting them or by writing numbers. So your mind will remember that there are 4 things to remember about operating activities. Does that make sense? It just draws your mind's attention to the patterns in it, and that's what you really want to be doing. So that's one thing. I would suggest that if you were then going to put the other information on the second page, that you do it in a different colour. I would suggest that you highlight, oh dear, I did mention my writing, didn't I? I would suggest activities, can't talk and write at the same time, whatever that is. I would suggest that you do the second so that your mind can remember, right, this is the blue lot, or this is the brown lot. And again, I would suggest that you draw your mind's attention to the to the items underneath. And again, you know, why not put numbers here? Because after all, then your mind will remember that there are 6 things to remember about this, and there are 4 things to remember about that. Do you see? I don't know what this means for our pilot group member. This is obviously significant. It means something. It might be a filing system, which is absolutely fine. A filing system for stacking this in your ring binder. Remember, you're going to use loose paper for your notes. And I would make that the same colour as this if that was relevant. It may not be relevant, it might just be a filing system, but just to flag up, just to draw your eye. You see, I've hardly used any colour in this section here, but it is just another way to help your brain. Use colour, use colour, use colour. Did I mention use colour to help yourself? Now, by doing that, you're drawing your mind's attention to the patterns. So now your mind can see the patterns. Does this kind of make sense? Oops. That then becomes a pattern for the mind to hang on to. So rather than just having a whole bunch of words on a page like that, you've then got a situation where you're drawing the pattern out for your unconscious mind to hang on to. You remember I've said before that we have an infinite capacity to remember pictures. Some people say they don't visualize very well. They don't have a very good visual memory. I say, tosh. Okay, some people are better than others. So for example, my husband's forever saying to me, have you seen my keys? Have you seen my wallet? Have you seen this? Have you seen that? And although I wasn't aware of it, now when I come to think about it, yeah, I remember seeing them on the dresser. I remember seeing them on the bottom of the stairs, and I can tell him where I think they are. And very often I'm right. So obviously I'm remembering that visual picture of those particular things because those particular things strike me as important because I know he's going to ask me. And presumably you could say that he doesn't have quite such a good visual memory because not only does he not remember putting these things down, he can't remember seeing them there as he's walked past them. So it's true to say that we have this skill to different strengths, I guess you could say. But it's also true to say that everybody has a visual memory. Otherwise, you wouldn't remember who your husband was. You wouldn't recognise your wife. You wouldn't know who your kids were from Adam. Of course, you recognise pictures of things. So give your brain the best chance of remembering the words by drawing them out in such a way that you're drawing attention to your mind of the patterns, and I'll show you that with the next thing we're going to do. So let's get rid of this then, and I'll move on to the next one. Do we have any questions about this? Actually, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to do this a different way. Do we have any questions about this so far? Let me just have a look. No questions? Everybody happy? All right. Let's go for the second one then. Profit before tax. Again, this very generous person has shared with us his notes, and he's done a good job on his notes, let's face it. He hasn't got too many words on the page, and he's made a list, and he's got symbols. Look at these symbols. These symbols mean something to him, mean absolutely nothing to me, and that's fine. It's not my notes, it's his notes. They mean something to him. And he's written very few words. He's just grabbed the keywords, as we talked about last week. Again, I think you probably know what I'm going to say. What did I say the first time? The first thing I said about the last one. This could be 2 pages worth. Yes, you're going to use a lot of paper. If that bothers you, go plant a tree. I'm not being facetious. I just want you to do what I know is going to work. You could do this on one page if you colour-coded the top lot in one colour, colour-coded the bottom lot in a different colour, put bullet points beside or numbers beside. That would also work, because actually in total there aren't too many things on there to remember. Remember, we say the rule is 7 or fewer. Well, in fact, you know, perhaps you could argue that this is more than 7, but you'd be dividing the whole lot into 2 groups, which would make it 2 bunches of fewer than 7. I wouldn't recommend it. I would suggest you use 2 pages. But if you want to do it this way, then definitely use colour. Divide them up like this. Make sure your brain can see 2 separate things, because then it's only got 3 things to remember up here and only 5 things to remember down here. At least I think so. They're not my notes. I don't know actually where this fits in, whether it's another one of these or whether it's a note to self, something to do with the title up here. I don't know. He'll know, of course. But, you know, presuming that that's a part of the list, there's only 5 things here, rather than a whole list of, well, you can add it up. 7, is it? 10, what am I talking about? I can't count. Okay, so I would suggest putting it on 2 pages. That's the first thing. And then I would say, definitely use colour. So I would use colour in the title. Do you see he hasn't actually used capital letters this time? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But I would definitely choose a colour and make this lot a colour. So it's just something else for your mind to hang on to. Remember, we talked about the brain having a holographic memory. That's to say that one memory is stored in lots of different places in the brain, because there are so many different aspects to a memory. If you cast your mind back to a holiday you've had, you see pictures, you hear sounds, you have feelings. There's all sorts of things. Smells might be associated with the holiday. So the more different things, the more colour you can use, the more in the way of drawing attention to the brain, the more of your brain you're using. So again, I would probably draw a line under the title to make that title stand out from the list. And then there's a variety of things that you can do. You can either colour code these sections here. So these 2 plus points, which seem to have plus in common, you can make in the same colour. And then choose a different colour for the one that's a minus. Couldn't you? Or you could set that one over here so that you have a pattern on the page that looks more like this. I hope this makes sense to you. You see what I'm trying to do? So that you're making a pattern of it. Or another thing I thought of is move the title over to the left. So you've got the title here. Let's add a layer. You've got the title here. Profit before tax, and then you've got your, your other stuff here. Now for the scribble, it doesn't really matter that it's scribbled because I want your brain to see the patterns. So look, if I get rid of the things that are in the way, you've now got colours. Let's make that wider. You can see the patterns on the page. So that top one will look like that because of the way that you've set it out. You've moved this over to one side, you've made the list obviously different from the title, and you might even have colour-coded those too. There's loads of different ways of doing this. I don't want you to think that my way is the only way and you've been doing it wrong. Absolutely nothing of the sort. But I just want to show you how you can do more to your notes to give your brain a better chance of remembering. Now look, if this was on one page, as I was suggesting, that would be all that was on that page. Can you see how much easier that would be to remember what's there? Let's go back to where we were. Let's think about this. Let's get rid of that. Oops. And of course you can do the same thing down here if you were to move that over and then make these into bullet points. Yeah? I'm not quite sure what that is. I'm assuming for the moment that's another bullet point. Or, as I've said before, turn them into numbers so that you know at a glance that there are 5 things to remember for this point. In which case, let's see, in which case the pattern you'd be making of it is, oopsie-daisy, something like this. Your title would be here, and then your bullet points would be here. Makes sense? And if that's all that was on the page, then that wouldn't be too much to remember. So in fact, your page would look more like this. Now you can see the patterns really clearly. I hope you can see what I'm saying. Would you please put your hand up if you get what it is that I'm saying about these patterns? That would be really fab if you don't mind. Oh yes, fantastic. Okay, that's great. Good. Now, some people are a little bit loath to use lots of pieces of paper because it feels wasteful. Because a lot of us are the offspring of a generation who were really having to scrimp and save during the war and just after the war. And, you know, you really made the most of everything. When things are scarce, you know, you jolly well do use everything up as, you know, to the nth degree. But the situation is that we have a very good recycling system. Oh, well, we hope. And certainly we can take responsibility for our use of paper. As I said before, you really can plant a tree and feel like you're putting something back if it bothers you. But you know the most important thing to you is to pass these exams. You wouldn't be here with me right now unless that was the case. So the best way to pass exams is to use lots of pieces of paper and write very few notes on the piece of paper and set things out so that you can see the patterns really easily. There is nothing wrong with the notes that this person has made already. I just want to show how you can help yourself even further. I hope that makes some sense. Now then, I notice, Avalon, you've got your hand up. Do you want to say something? Oh, I've never seen anybody put their hand down faster. Okie dokie. Thanks for that. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So there's a lot more to be said on that front, and we can do that another time. But for the moment, as you continue to make your notes, use colour. I think I mentioned that before, and see if you can set out your notes so that you can see the patterns instantly, and use lots of pieces of paper, and write very few notes on each piece of paper. You know it makes sense.
Anything can be learnt if it's divided up into small enough chunks. And once you've reduced the content of a small chunk of the course manual to just a few words, and you've spent enough time with the information for your brain to make a pattern of it and send it to your long-term memory, you need a question so you can test yourself on the chunk tomorrow, a week later, and then monthly until the exam. That's according to the learning cycle, isn't it? Key to learning number 3. Now, the question you devise for yourself isn't the sort you'd get in the exam. It's merely what somebody else would have to ask you to check that you know the notes that you've made for this chunk. Keep the question simple and easy to understand. It's meant to act as a prompt to have you successfully regurgitate the notes on the other side. Here are some notes, for example. They're on one side of the paper, on the left-hand side there. And I would actually make full use of the page. I'd probably turn it round. I wouldn't squish it into the middle like I've had to do because I'm using the computer. And then as you turn the page over, you see there that you'd put your question on the other side. See how simple it is? When you make up your question, make sure you don't give any part of the answer away in the question. Just be careful about that. Also notice that on the question side, top right there, look, I've categorised where this chunk of revision belongs to in the grand scheme of things. After all, it's no good remembering a chunk if you don't know what it's to do with. So putting, in this example, protection, planning and income protection needs at the top there, it anchors this chunk of information to what it belongs to. Also, of course, it allows you to file it away in your ring binder in the right section so it's easy to find when you come to test yourself on it later. Notice where the holes are on the paper, because you store it question side up. Some people make the mistake of looking at their notes first when they test themselves, but of course they're cheating themselves if they do that. They're only testing their short-term memory if they've just looked at the answer. So by filing your notes question side up, you can ensure that when you test yourself, you're not cheating yourself. You're having to recall that information from your brain, from your long-term memory, at least from yesterday, if not the week or the month before. And only when you've given your answer, then you would turn over to check your notes on the other side, make sure you've remembered everything. And if you don't, if there's anything on there that you didn't quite remember, even if it's just a small part, then don't be satisfied with that. Spend more time with the information, change your notes if necessary. And when you test yourself, close your eyes and see your notes in your mind's eye. Say the answer out loud and draw your notes in the air. Write and draw your notes in the air. You're using far more of your brain if you do that. And if you've got to do that a second time because you didn't remember everything you intended to, you've got to start that as day 1 again of the revision cycle. You've got to reset the revision cycle. So wherever you'd got to before, maybe it was a week later or a month later, you've got to cancel that and start all over again with day 1 so that after you've done the extra work today, you check tomorrow that you know it. That's the only way to make sure you remember absolutely everything. So when you get into the swing of it, you'll be testing yourself the day after, a week later, and monthly until the exam. If you don't, you're setting yourself up to forget most of what you've learnt. Much of it will be gone by the next day, and more than 80% will be gone within 2 weeks. And in some people, it's much quicker than 2 weeks. So once you've revised and learnt a chunk of information from your course manual, you need to put it into the calendar so you can forget about trying to organise yourself to remember to test yourself in the future, because the calendar will do that for you. But before we do that, I will have a question for you. Are you using the online revision calendar? If not, why not? I really want to know. You really need to keep on top of each separate revision chunk according to the learning cycle. If you don't, you're setting yourself up to forget 80% of what you've learnt within 2 weeks. Keeping tabs on those chunks in any other way, other than using this automated system I've developed for you, becomes very unwieldy and untenable in next to no time. This bit of software I've developed for you, I've designed it to make all the difference. Use it properly and it will guarantee your success. That's what you want, isn't it? So if you've not been using it, then watch training video number 2, which shows you how to do it. It's really simple. And get into the habit of putting each chunk you learn into it so that it can remind you when to test yourself. I had a phone call a couple of days ago from someone who, before joining Genius Material, was working exceptionally hard, doing all the right things, except regularly testing himself. As a consequence, he'd failed, I think it was the Arrow 2 exam, but he'd failed a recent exam twice. And I think the biggest thing that he was missing was simply key to learning number 3, the testing yourself according to the learning cycle. So the whole process is like a jigsaw puzzle. You need all 3 pieces. It's a good job it's not a 5,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. It's just the 3 things. You need to pay attention to all 3 keys to learning, or your natural tendency to forget stuff will have you fail the exam time and time again. Some of you have proved that. Because that's perfectly normal for us. Forgetting stuff is normal. You need to ask yourself, do you want to be normal when it comes to taking exams, or do you want to be extraordinary? Because it is out of the ordinary for people to know and then to do what it takes to retain information. They say, don't they, that knowing and not doing is not knowing at all. But you do know. So use the calendar. That's what it's there for. Okay, rant over. I do want you to succeed. I want you to give yourself the best chance. That's why I'm going on about it. I think you get the message. So that's it then for this week. Good luck, and let me know if you need some help. Goodbye.